So hello, how's it going? I'm Eric Sorenson. As Mike said, I'm the product owner for the Puppet platform. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Puppet Enterprise 3, which we just released in July and shipped a point release for just last week. We'll talk through how we got here. We'll dive in a little bit and see what's in the box. And then I'll talk a little bit about what the road ahead looks like for Puppet and Puppet Enterprise. So it seems a little strange to look at it this way because Puppet's code base has been around since 2006, but Puppet Enterprise as a product, a thing you can buy, is really only a couple of years old. It launched in 2011 with Puppet Enterprise 1.0, which really focused on Puppet's core competencies of configuration management and provided a user interface for viewing and inspecting reports. Things sort of ramped up in late 2011 with the launch of Puppet Enterprise 2.0. We added some cloud provisioning and the first iteration of the orchestration engine. And then throughout the 2 series, we added a bunch of feature releases that added things like support for Windows as a client, the ability to use an external authentication source so that you could integrate the Puppet Enterprise console with your LDAP server, and the ability to manage new certificates right from the user interface. We shipped PE 2.8 earlier this year, and it added support for AIX. But some real talk, I mean, it took a long time, probably too long to turn out PE 3.0 because even while this stuff was going on, there was a huge amount of activity and new innovation that was going on in the open source projects that make up Puppet Enterprise. PuppetDB came out and replaced the old store configs format, which was slow, and for anybody who ran a significant site would be probably the first bottleneck that you ran into if you wanted to take the configurations that you were running on one machine and save them out to the database so they could be collected and used by other Puppet code on other machines. And mcollective 2 came out, added a really fine-grained way to split your network into subcollectives. That was actually introduced in an earlier version, but I really think it came to fruition in mcollective 2, and also added some awesome filter syntax. Last year at PuppetConf, I talked about the brand new, at the time, Puppet Open Source 3.0 release, which had a main focus on performance, as well as adding some features like data bindings, which lets you automatically integrate HIRA data into your Puppet code without having to add additional lookup syntax directly in line with your code. And since then, the platform team has really continued to push the envelope with new point releases in the Puppet open source series of 3.1 and 3.2. One of the main focuses here has been the integration for developers, partners, and people who wanted to do integrations such as Foreman with Puppet, where previously there wasn't really a defined API, and there was sort of some cargo cult stuff that you could poke at it in a particular way and get some output, but we didn't really have a solid API documentation. And now there's really great yard documentation that can be auto-generated from the source code and is browsable, and you can know exactly how to use Puppet as a library and integrate your own code with it, as well as some sophisticated work that Henrik, who's up here in the front row, worked on for the future parser. And if you played it all with Puppet Open Source 3.2, you can actually enable some new features in the language, like loops and iteration, that use that technology. mcollective 2.2 has added direct addressing, so instead of the previous broadcast paradigm where every message that you sent went to every node, you can directly address nodes, and if you have a large number of nodes in your collective, that can really speed things up. And PuppetDB added report storage, so now reports as well as catalogs and facts can go directly into PuppetDB and take advantage of all the awesome performance. So all that great innovation was out there in the world, but it was not actually shipping in a commercial product until Puppet Enterprise 3. So what do people want out of a new software release? What's the point of putting out new software, and what do we want? Like some respectful discourse. One of the main focuses from the advances in the open source side was the performance stuff. And so I'm a giant dork for bikes. I'll freely admit that. And the prevalence of cyclocross season was one of the main draws for me to move up to Portland and go work for Puppet Labs. It's a bike race that's kind of like part steeplechase, where you have to pick up your bike and jump over barriers, part mountain biking, part road cycling. And this guy, does anyone know who this is? Anyone have any other cyclocross? Okay, I feel like a total nut now. His name's Sven Nys. He's Belgian, obviously from his jersey, and he's the #1 cyclocross dude in the world. He's a 6-time world champion. And the other people that he races against, like Burt Wallens is behind him, are also like Olympic caliber athletes, but Sven Nys is the best of all of them. And his chief rivals acknowledge that they feel lucky when they're able to beat him in a race. So that's the kind of world-class performance that we're aiming for in Puppet Enterprise 3. There's a huge amount of tough engineering work that sped up the underpinnings of Puppet Enterprise. I talked a little bit about the performance work that was in Puppet 3.0. That's continued to refine over time in Puppet 3.2. Every component in the stack got an update, and more importantly, the versions are consistent across all of the platforms, all the operating systems that Puppet Enterprise runs on, which can be kind of a pain to get going on your own. It seems like about every week I talk to somebody who's trying to get a solid Puppet installation working on the open source stuff on something that's not one of the major Linux distributions, Solaris on Spark, or I talked to some AIX folks on IRC the other day, and our release engineering team has done some amazing work. Actually, they're giving a talk. Moses and Matt House are talking about the pipeline they use to build all the things at 5.10 today. So if you're interested in that build pipeline and get everything packaged for releases that are for different operating systems, and getting this 30 or 40 package stack built, go check out their talk. But Puppet mcollective had major version bumps. The change in Puppet from the network transport using YAML as the serialization format instead previously, now it uses JSON. That by itself can give up to 10 times speed up for large formats that go over the wire, such as a big catalog. And we also have a dashboard 2.0, which Aaron Stone is talking about tomorrow at 5 o'clock. His talk is on the road to 5.0. Aaron took over the community maintenance of Dashboard and was able to bump up its underpinnings to a modern version of Rails, where it had previously been kind of frozen in the past, as well as some internal engineering work that went in to shift the database engine underneath it to Postgres from MySQL. So we have a consistent database. You're not running two different database systems. Everything's in Postgres, and both your PuppetDB stuff and your dashboard are talking to the same database backend. I should say the same kind of database backend. They don't necessarily have to talk to the exact same database. So the Ruby update by itself is pretty huge. That paired with PuppetDB, Postgres, the performance is pretty awesome. But you don't have to just take my word for it. We have some actual numbers. For the first time in Puppet's history, we did some math around how fast things were. It was a revolutionary idea, but the results were pretty awesome. We found that we were able to actually run literally double the number of clients against talking to the same server without bumping up the hardware. So that's like a free server for you across your infrastructure, as well as we're able to process catalog compilations almost 3 times faster. So the code that generated the numbers for these guys is based on a Scala load testing framework called Gatling. And as you can see, that's the repository for it. That stuff's open source. So if you want to, you can take the Puppet Jenkins integration and run that on your own infrastructure internally and build your own performance numbers. And that way, if you build that into a continuous delivery pipeline, you can find out really quickly if, for instance, a new module that you downloaded or some new code that was written in-house slowed down the performance of your masters really quickly. So that's some pretty awesome stuff. But performance alone is not really enough to make a major version number. We're continually searching for the next new features. Any krautrock fans? So maybe my interests are really off the wall here. I don't know. So Neu is the German word for new. It's also one of the seminal krautrock bands from the 70s. And if you're like a long-haired crazy guy in the 70s and you really wanted to push the limits of what you can do, you'd of course name your band Neu. We have a lot of new features in PE3, so I want to talk through some of the great new stuff that we have available. So this is the orchestration engine GUI called Live Management that lets you talk to the mcollective setup that's under the hood of Puppet Enterprise 3. This lets you quickly filter out the hosts. I only have 2 hosts in my little VM network here, but you can use either host names up on the top left, a class which belongs on a particular host. So if you had a big list and wanted to trim it down to just the hosts which were assigned a particular class, you can do that right here, as well as use fact matching and say only match hosts that have an operating system set to Linux. You can filter that out really easily in the GUI here. And the types of things that you can do with Live Management are pretty awesome. There's a new resource type. You could always browse some of the basic resource types, but we added the ability to look at services that are running across your infrastructure, as well as a brand new Puppet agent, which actually controls Puppet that's running on your nodes. And this lets you do some amazing, really fine-grained control over what's happening on the Puppet that's running on your mcollective nodes. As you can see, we can turn it off, turn it on. You can also provide a reason or a string that will be saved out onto the machines. So when people come along and try to run them, run a machine that's been set into maintenance mode, they don't get a generic error. They get the message that you left them as an administrator, like, hey, this host is down. We're in quiet time. Don't make any changes here. We can also see if the agent has been run lately and whether it was successful or not. We can invoke a single Puppet run with the run once command across all the nodes, which we have filtered. We have our filter restricted to, and also provide some really granular options to those guys as they run. So for instance, we could trigger a simulation run across the nodes, and just the nodes which we have selected in the Live Management user interface are going to kick off a dry run. We can go back and check out the reports for them. Chris Barker and Nigel Kirsten did a demo of this that's linked off of the webinars. I also did one that failed due to weird reasons, but I was able to rescue it towards the end. So if you want to see me fumble around in the user interface for a little bit, you can look for the webinar I did on PE3. So that's Live Management from the user interface. There's also obviously a CLI underneath the hood of the orchestration engine. And a lot of powerful stuff is available if you drop down to the CLI and start issuing commands to it. This is a screen grab from a webinar that Ari Piener did on the blog. If you just search for progressive deployment with Puppet Enterprise, you'll find this great demo where he builds up a pretty complicated command line, starting off quite simply and then adding more and more of the advanced features that are available in the orchestration engine, such as using the EC2 API for the discovery method instead of the broadcast against the current collective, filters out to just the hosts which are in this EU West 1B availability zone based on the results from the Amazon API, and then does a progressive deployment that limits to 2 hosts in flight at any time and pauses 10 seconds in between each pair of machines that are running. So you can imagine running this in a larger infrastructure. You might want to do a rolling update of all your machines and only run 10% of the machines at a time, so you still maintain availability while the update is rolling out. And mcollective will do the discovery based on your pluggable discovery source, filter the results down, and then follow the constraints that you provide on the command line to make sure that, for instance, 10% or just an absolute number or whatever of your hosts are going to be executing at any given time. So that's pretty awesome. Check out the whole webcast. It's just about 5 minutes long, and at the end of it, you'll just be like mind blown. This is amazing. I got to get me some of this. one awesome thing about using this in PE3 as opposed to putting it together from parts is that mcollective is, honestly, it's powerful. It is also difficult to set up, particularly to set up in a secure way and a secure, scalable way. But PE3 does that out of the box for you. So people who may be great with Puppet, but you're not used to using message brokers or some of the technology that's underlying mcollective, you can just install PE3 and you'll have this set up for you without any additional work on your part. You can just get down to the business of controlling your nodes with the orchestration engine. Let me just point out a couple of other cool features in the console, and these are available as a result of the collaboration between Aaron and the engineers at Puppet Labs. We now have the ability to manage the parameters for various classes that your hosts are using. And this is a great way to make use of Forge modules directly from the user interface, and to use Forge modules and customize them for your own site by providing parameters to them. In this couple of screenshots, and these are two separate screens, one on the top and one on the bottom. On the first one, I went in and modified my node group that uses that's called Windows and uses the 7-zip class, and added a parameter to that class to set the version of all these hosts to 9.2.0. So that instructs the module to set the version for those hosts to 9.2 instead of the default, which I think is 9.0. So in that way, we have a really nice granular method for customizing the Forge modules that we get. If you want to learn more about Forge modules, and I'm going to do a lot of these shout outs because we have this is covering a lot of territory, and any one of the slides that I'm talking about here is subject to, or is the subject of deeper diving talks. And Ryan Coleman, who's the main guy on the Forge, is talking about module reusability in this room at 3 p.m. And Alessandro Franceschi is talking tomorrow at 1:30 on the anatomy of reusable modules, how to write a module for maximum reusability. Last thing here, I alluded to this in the last slide, but Windows support overall has taken a huge leap forward in Puppet Enterprise 3. How many of you, can you raise your hands if you either have are currently managing or have some Windows machines that you'd like to manage with Puppet? I'm quite curious about this. Wow, that's quite a lot. It's like over half of the people. That's really awesome. So Windows and Puppet have had, as I said, sort of a long history. We've run on Windows and supported it in Puppet Enterprise since version 2.5, but there are some concepts that are just tough to translate from the very kind of Unix-centric models that Puppet is based on into the Windows world. We recently beefed up our engineering staff around that, and the results of that are starting to show in Puppet Enterprise 3. For instance, we now have live management capabilities that are come out of the box for Windows, so you can do all of the commands that you can run on Unix and Linux systems will also work on Windows through live management. Additionally, the engineers have worked on adding really tightly integrated support for very Windows-centric constructs, for instance, the package management. In this screenshot, I kind of overlaid, in the background is the hopefully familiar add, use, add, remove programs, which in recent versions of Windows keeps moving around. I think just when I think I know where it is based on my days playing Quake on Windows 2000, it's like, I can't find this thing anymore. But it's add, remove programs, and and the output in the console window is from one of the start menu commands that Puppet Enterprise installs for you, and it's the output of Puppet Resource Package. And Puppet Resource is a way from the command line to explore the kinds of resources that are available to you that Puppet can manage on your systems. And Puppet Resource Package tells Puppet to tell me everything about all the package resources you know. As you can tell, the output from the Puppet matches up very closely to what you see in the add remove programs, which means that you can use the same management paradigm that you use on your Windows machines on your Linux machines to manage yum updates or apt updates to Windows packages as well. And the syntax looks the same. We use the same kind of concepts. And now we speak Windows. So that's pretty neat. But that's not all. There's much, much more There's so much more stuff. There's a ton of changes that are in Puppet Enterprise 3, including a lot of bug fixes. If we look at the bug tracker, there are literally hundreds of bugs that were fixed from the time that Puppet Enterprise 2.8 came out until the Puppet 3.2 that Puppet Enterprise is based on. We have support for new operating systems like SLES 11. There's updates for the AX support, Windows stuff I talked about. There are upgrade and scaling guides to help you get started and get your Puppet Enterprise setup going smoothly and quickly. So, and as before, the licensing remains the same. You can download it for free and manage 10 nodes so you can get a good proof of concept going and see how easy it is to manage stuff in your infrastructure. So let me talk a little bit about the road ahead, as I said. You remember the slide from the beginning? I've kind of extended the roadmap out into the misty future. And things get a little fuzzy further out, but the goal is sort of a reliable tick-tock kind of cadence. Some of my former colleagues from Apple are here in the audience, and I think the best exemplar of this is the iPhone cadence, where you can buy an iPhone 4, skip the 4S, and you're going to want a 5. We're aiming for a similar kind of thing with Puppet Enterprise, where you can stay with what's a really great product, skip a major version if your change control your risk mitigation involves keeping things stable in production for a long time and still know that you're going to be on support. And when the next one comes along, even if you skip the version, you'll be able to get a great product the next year around. I'll talk a bit about that more in a minute. I don't want to get too roadmappy, but the themes for the PE releases are things like the continuous delivery workflows, the cloud automation and provisioning, and reporting and data, like the demo that Joe Wagner gave this morning. Concurrent with that, we're going to be releasing stuff in the open source that focuses on additional language capabilities, expressiveness and power. Performance, obviously, is going to continue to be a huge focus. We're moving Puppet to a more scalable, service-oriented architecture over time, and away from sort of a monolithic architecture that we have now, and continually enhancing how we run on different operating systems. And the idea is that these kinds of features and changes will hit in the open source version fast, so people who have low risk aversion, like to live on the bleeding edge, can download it, run it, submit patches, help us figure it out. And the best of those features are going to make it into stable versions in Puppet Enterprise within a couple of quarters. I alluded to the support lifecycle earlier, and this kind of illustrates the fact that we're going to have, sort of roughly a year of feature releases for a particular major release, overlap a little bit of feature releases once the next major one comes out, but pretty quickly you're going to go on to a security lifespan, and the goal there is to have about 3 years of support for any given major release. Meanwhile, the feature releases are moving on, and hopefully new users will be able to dive in and get a really great product when they're just starting out with it. And existing customers will, if they have great process internally and have really compelling features they want to upgrade to, they'll be able to do that pretty rapidly. And if you have, as I said, a sort of slower moving, more risk-averse organization, you're totally going to be supported for that for a couple of years. So that's it. The question, or the sort of question I posed in my opening slide is, how awesome is Puppet Enterprise 3? I think it's pretty awesome. It may even be more awesome than RoboCop on a unicorn. As I said, we have world-class performance, great new features and functionality, and a clear path ahead to even more awesomeness in the future. So go download it and check out PE3 today. Maybe not today. Maybe once you get home on your own Wi-Fi. You can download and check it out. Anyways, thanks. I'll take some questions. If you guys want, please come up to the microphone in the middle here, and I'm happy to talk about whatever questions you guys have. Thank you.
How are you finding most customers are upgrading from Puppet 2 to Puppet 3? Are they doing in-place upgrades? Are they standing up a new stack and migrating?
That's a great question. So up until last week, their only choice was to stand up a new stack and migrate, because we held the update support. We're still working on the update support when it's time to ship Puppet Enterprise 3. So we released that as part of PE 3.0.1, which came out last week. I think still the way that we're recommending in our upgrade guides and the way that people have been having the most success is indeed to set up a new stack and migrate the host over to it. We have some great documentation on how to do that safely, how to make sure that your certificates transfer over correctly, your data transfers over correctly, and your nodes, it should be pretty seamless for the nodes. That said, the upgrade support does work great, and I think if you have a fairly recent Puppet Enterprise 2 installation, that the upgrade may be a fine way to go. Usually, though, if people have a PE2 installation, it's been out there for a while, they might want to move from, say, RHEL 5 to RHEL 6 along with the update cycle, and so it's a great time to do that. I think either way will work. My personal recommendation would be to stand up a new stack and migrate over to it using the migration guide.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. Anything else? I have a few more minutes. One more.
How you doing?
Hi.
I wanted to ask you with regards to security, PCI, NIST, and auditing. Is those types of thought processes going to be incorporated into Puppet? I'm being clever with enforcing NIST rules with my own homemade modules, but with the auditing from my security team, like I give them, the access to the web GUI, but because we're maintaining a state, they're not seeing things like, yes, login.defs has this, without giving them what I have in my repo. So I was just curious if that was something that's going to be embraced in the future releases.
Good question. Thank you. So auditing varies hugely from site to site, and everybody's requirements are going to be different. I think there are some things that we're not going to be able to work on, although we have some great work in the government sector from people who are working on modules to enforce. I have a hard time with the .gov acronym. Sorry, STIM I think is the security framework that they have. In the past, I've given my Puppet manifest to auditors, and we're able to strip out some of the passwords and hand over the Puppet manifest. And they're like, oh, this is exactly what we're asking for from everybody. Why can't everybody just give us this? So that's been pretty cool. I think we're definitely moving towards a world where more events will be captured in the event inspector that Joe showed this morning, and you'll be able to examine the reports more closely and hopefully have a great help your auditors get great insight into what's going on in your site. I don't have a specific answer for you about the various, whether Puppet Enterprise specifically is going to be compliant to various standards, but I know somebody to talk to, so if you come and talk to me afterwards, we can go track it down. Anything else? No? All right, I guess I'm about 10 minutes early, so that's great. Thanks a lot for your attention. See you.